The last thing I want to say, I'm not going to give any big hints, but pay attention to my video that comes out on Christmas Eve. If everything works correctly, there should be a special video coming out. That'll be pretty cool. Okay, so check it out. Yeah, I can't really give any more away, but it's going to be a pretty cool one if everything works out. If I can do all my editing and get it all taken care of, there should be a pretty cool video coming out that after the video is released, some people are going to be very happy about what comes from that video. Okay, that's about all the hints that I can give. There's a lot of stuff still working on that video. It's this really cool thing that I decided to do. I'm super excited about it. So if everything goes well, there'll be a video Christmas Eve, the Thursday. Okay, and some people are going to be very happy. Okay, so just keep an eye out for that video. This video is brought to you by Sporlan. Quality, integrity, and tradition.
Well, I have a service tech here doing a preventative maintenance today, and he actually came up on the roof and this exhaust fan is not working. What's interesting is the restaurant didn't even know that it wasn't working, and this is one of their main exhaust fans. But this kind of stuff is happening more and more because these restaurants are closed, only open to to-go service. So, you know, they don't even have people eating on the patios right now. So, you know, when things like this happen, they tend to not notice it right away, versus if they were a super busy restaurant, they would have called us immediately, you know? So we're gonna go through this guy. He did tell me that the motor was really hot, but that's as far as he checked, so I'm gonna dive into it. Pulled the cover off, but just walking up, I'm looking at everything. We got a broken conduit, so that's something we're definitely going to address on this. The motor itself is, I believe he has it turned off. I should probably be careful. But it looks really greasy in there. Like, look at all that dust buildup and stuff. Let's go ahead and make sure this guy's off. Yeah, it's off. And then let's go ahead and pop the top on it. Take a look at the wheel. Make sure there's no damage. There's no damage. I mean, everything's spinning properly. It's greasy though. The exhaust just goes straight down into the building. Nothing crazy there, so that's cool. You gotta love these. This is a Super Hinge by Omni Containment. I love these things. We try to use them as much as possible. They make these fans last, you know, a lot longer than the factory hinges. So, hinge them back. Usually has a safety chain, but this isn't a very heavy exhaust fan. So, again, I haven't checked it yet, but this is a ball door motor. Certainly could be cleaned and everything. We are turned off, so it's not locked up. It rotates. Oh yeah, that motor's certainly hot, for sure. So I don't see any electrical shorts. They're just running like an SJ cord. It's not brittle, it's not broken, the belt's not too tight. We're gonna have to get in here and check power. I was trying to decide how I wanted to approach this, because I could easily pull the switch out and check, you know, line voltage at the switch and then see load voltage at the switch. But the best way, I guess, to do this would be to go ahead and pull the motor, because we do have an SJ cord down here, so we have slack. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the motor, set it up here, and then test voltage while it's live to see if we're delivering the proper power, because theoretically we could have a broken line between the switch and the motor and maybe possibly misdiagnose unless we pull it out and check it. Exhaust fans can kind of be tricky usually. So all right, got the thermal imager out. Let's see what that motor's doing right now. Hop in here. Oh boy. So it looks like we got a hot spot. So that motor's definitely going off, possibly on thermal. 150, 160 is what I'm seeing on it. That's a pretty hot motor right now. This is going to end up more than likely being a 208 single phase. It's either, well, it's either 115 or 230, but it's going to be single phase. I have to say though, this thing has been heating up because this is a resilient mount, and look at that rubber bushing. This thing's been probably going off on thermal or something for a while, because this bushing's completely like solidified. I'm not a fan of using resilient mounts on exhaust fans because they twist in operation, and you can clearly see it because look at the torque makes them twist when they're in there. Because look at the electrical cover. Obviously when this motor was installed, someone got to the electrical cover, but it's twisted all the way in, which can also short things out. So we got to loosen the resilient mount, and twist it back so we can get to the electrical. Okay, so we're energized. I'm gonna go ahead and check voltage at the terminals to see what we got. 209 volts, so we've got good voltage. The motor is, I can physically feel it trying, so it's not off on thermal yet, but it's probably going on and off on thermal overload. So, look at that. So when I spun it, I got it to start. So there's a very good possibility that we have a capacitor failing and or a motor failing. On something like this though, the small of a motor, to be honest with you, it's not going to really be worth changing the capacitor because that's a funky little capacitor. But I'll open it up and look at it just for the heck of it. Alright, so first off, when I was taking it out, the whole thing's brittle and breaking. All the wires are brittle and everything. Even inside the motor, it's been overheating for a while. So we test across the capacitor and we get nothing. So we definitely have a bad start cap, but this is a really funky one. It's more cost effective for me. I'm not going to find 125 volt 189 227 here locally. I certainly could order it, but not locally. But those motors are so cheap, it's just going to be better off changing it. Plus, we don't know what damage is inside that motor. Again, all these wires are brittle and breaking right here, like it just snapped inside the case of the motor. It's not worth rebuilding that motor or anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and quote for a motor replacement. One thing I will say, we're paying attention, is I noticed that this pulley is open almost all the way, and that's a very small pulley. We got the belt right here, and you can see how the belt is really riding in there. So my thought is that someone pretty much opened this, it very likely was me, pretty much opened this. Actually, there's a note right here, open the pulley 2 times by me right on the wall. It's probably open to the max. So I'm gonna try to, I don't know if I can, I'm gonna try to get a smaller pulley so that way it's not opened all the way. And also, if there's a possibility that we need to open it even more, maybe the motor's overamping slightly or something like that, but the fact that it's pretty much opened all the way concerns me. So I'm gonna see if I can get a smaller pulley so that way it's not opened all the way. And you also have room to adjust it if we ever needed to again. So, all right, we're gonna take down the specs on this guy. The specs that we need is all the data off the motor. We need the shaft size, the pulley size. We need to inspect this pulley. I don't see any problems with it. Inspect the bearings, inspect the exhaust fan. I don't really see any other problems with the fan itself. This location has really high temperatures in the summertime, about 120, 125 degrees in the summer. So imagine the temperature of this motor. It gets ridiculously hot. The wiring, I've done this before, but the wiring in these things is going to go ahead and need to be replaced because it gets very brittle. And we'll likely go ahead and include a new double pole power switch in there too, or a 2-pole power switch. And then we'll redo the conduit going back is my thought. So, okay, we are back today. We just turned off power at the switch and isolated it. We're gonna fix this conduit. We're gonna go all through this thing. So hopefully I have the right fittings. I'm hoping that looks like a 1/2 inch, I think. We're gonna change the motor and all that. So this place was re-roofed many years ago, and the new roof basically added like 2.5 inches of insulation to it. I remember doing it because I had to do a bunch of work and lift equipment up and stuff. But if you look at this presents a problem. So when I pull this fitting off, there's not enough room on the piece of EMT to screw into this electrical box. Guys, this is gonna look really shady, but I had to make like a little mechanism because I don't have the right fitting for this. Essentially, what I need is a flare to flare fitting. I'm sorry, I need this piece right here, this 1/2 inch fitting. So it looks silly, guys, but what I did was they had a piece of EMT conduit lying on the roof. I cut it, I used EMT connectors, and it's essentially gonna screw onto that. It's not gonna be the prettiest thing in the world. It is gonna extend up just a little bit, but it's gonna be functional. And so it threads into that, and then we'll thread that into that box and then extend the wires up. So, hey, I'm not perfect, but you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. All right, I left for a second to take a phone call, and the guy that I'm working with, I had him run the conduit, and I wanted to kind of point something out, and I was just explaining to him what we're doing here. So when we run this conduit, we are hinging the exhaust fan open, okay? Because obviously the grease cleaners are gonna come, and they need to be able to hinge the exhaust fan and have the conduit to the point that it's long enough, right? Because there's nothing worse than having to pull open the exhaust fan and then not be able to open it because of the conduit. But another really important thing that I was just explaining that we need to pay attention to is we don't want the conduit to droop in the closed position, okay? So the exhaust fan's closed. We do not want this conduit to make a drip leg that would fill up with condensation, okay? Because every once in a while you get condensation in these things. And what you don't want is for it to come down and create a place for condensation to sit. So on this conduit, we're actually gonna trim it because it's not horrible, but it has a slight droop to it right there that I'm afraid of. So we're gonna trim maybe an inch or two off just to get rid of that. So that way in the future, like if you see this one, as time happens, that conduit gets heavier and heavier, and we just don't want it to droop. So always want to pay attention to that. That's how I try to do these as much as possible. Another way you could solve that is by strapping it right here, but I prefer not to if I don't have to. I prefer not to drill into the exhaust vent. So we're going to try to trim this conduit just by like a ½ inch, maybe an inch. Got kind of a mess going on up here. That's how I typically work, stuff everywhere. So we went ahead, got the wires tied in. We're actually going downstairs right now to turn on power so we can test it to make sure we have 208 single phase. I went ahead and used the same kind of cord, but I put a better connector on it so that way it's nice and secure. And it's running through a grommet right here, and I just gave us a little service loop so that way we can pull the motor out and diagnose if you ever needed to. Everything's nice and snug like it should be. We're gonna go ahead and grease these bearings too, clean them up. We've got power turned on, so let's go ahead and measure voltage here. 211, so we're good, 212. And let's go ahead and check motor rotation. So we've got a rotation indicator right there. Bump this guy real quick. And we are going the wrong direction. That is why we put a service loop on there, guys. That's why we don't make it a hard, super tight thing, because that motor was a pain in the butt to get in there, by the way. It barely fit in there. So yeah, that's gonna suck. But anyways, I got a service loop, we'll pull it out. You can reverse the rotation on the motor. So all right, to change the rotation, there's a little label on the side right here, and it says to interchange black and red. So we've got a red wire up there, and then we have a black wire tucked right back down there below my finger. So I got to get in there with the needle nose and rearrange them, and then we should have the phase or the rotation corrected. So again, this is not 3-phase, so that's why we do it this way. I hate working on these things, but you got to do it correct. So I had to get in there and like rearrange the wires so that way they're not just drooped over each other and they're not going to put unneeded stress in weird places. So I had to run wires underneath wires, but it's all done. We're going to put it back together and hope that everything's good now. So I set the new one at the same speed, or same pulley diameter, okay? I had talked about going to a smaller pulley, but I couldn't find one. What I ended up doing, because I was just worried that because the pulley was open so much, that potentially someone might have done that to slow it down because it was overamping, okay? That's why I was just kind of concerned. I can't remember if I put this motor in or not. For some reason, my gut was telling me this thing might have been overamping. So I went ahead and went with a bigger motor instead. I was able to get the same platform motor in a 3/4 horsepower, which gave me more room. So we currently are allowed to run 5.2 amps on this motor, and we are running 3.49 at the same pulley, opening. So we're good. We're running the same speed. We have room to speed it up if we ever needed to. I still need to grease these bearings, but it is also running in the right direction now too. So we're looking good. So we're going to clean this guy up, grease these bearings, get that going. Motor's running good. I like it. We've got the correct voltage. We're just going to do little things like put the gasket on and all that good stuff. All right, exhaust fan's back on. Got a cover plate on this guy. Nice and good. Cover plate on that. Oh, and I wanted you guys to see this little chingus that I made just because I didn't have the fitting. I know I could have gone to the hardware store, but I had this here, so it's just a rain tight to a rain tight and a piece of EMT in between, and we just tightened it down. So everything's nice and good. Conduit's right length. Customer's going to be really happy they have an exhaust fan. Funny thing is, they didn't even know it was down, but
it's kind of funny how, these restaurants can have this stuff happen and not even know that they have an exhaust fan down. It's kind of sad when you think about it too, because this is a high volume restaurant. Normally this would have been an emergency service call. They would have made me fix it that night. They wouldn't have been able to operate without that exhaust fan. But unfortunately, because they are so slow right now, they're barely cooking anything. Except for a few to-go orders, they don't even know that they had an exhaust fan down. I'm even surprised that this particular restaurant is still having us do preventative maintenances. I mean, I'm thankful for it, but I mean, I would understand certainly if they didn't want to do PM service, temporarily, but hey, I'm thankful for what I can get. So yeah, my guy was there doing the maintenance and he was doing his job. He found an issue that they didn't even know about. So that's what we go there to do preventative maintenance for. We're cleaning, we're checking everything out. Where, it's normal situations, you're just saying, hey, that motor's making a loud noise or something like that. But this one, the whole thing was down, So I want to kind of clarify a little bit about why I didn't put a new capacitor on that motor. You have to understand the context. The ambient temperature in this location is ridiculously high. Okay, we go through motors, no joke, 1 to 2 times a year. I mean, we change motors at least every 2 years. Okay, every motor in this building, if it's an outdoor motor, probably gets changed at least every 2 years. Condenser fan motors, exhaust fan motors, all that stuff. The extreme heat that they get here just kills everything. Okay, so I'm making an educated decision. I certainly could have ordered a new capacitor and probably got it going, but I know from experience that this restaurant has those high temperature issues. And when I was pulling the capacitor out, the capacitor itself, the plastic on it had been getting so hot that it was just brittle on the capacitor alone. And then the wiring for the capacitor was cracking and popping, like the insulation, the jacket on it was breaking. And I could feel it as I was moving it around. You could just feel it crack, crack, crack. Okay, that's because the insulation jacket has been overheating. And just imagine what it looks like under the case of that motor, So you have to be able to walk up to this and say, hey, you know what, this is a candidate for putting a capacitor on it or something like that. Now, my opinion, to be honest with you, I'm not a fan of putting capacitors on motors like that because usually there's more damage. The thing's been going off on thermal, causing all kinds of issues. And it just seems like a disaster of callbacks and warranty, crud. So I'm just not a fan of doing that, but I certainly could have ordered a capacitor. But also, on a side note, finding a capacitor of that size, usually you find that in a 250 volt or a 440 volt. Finding a 125 volt is also a little interesting. I just don't see my normal supply houses having that. But regardless, I already had it in my mind that I was going to change the motor anyways, okay? So went ahead, the whole big picture thing, looking at everything. You're trying to figure out what's going on, okay? Knowing that the wires in there are all brittle, I went ahead and changed that switch. I'm just thinking, about the big picture, okay? I approach these things because this location is an hour and a half away from my shop. It's out in the boonies. It gets extremely hot out there. There are limited supply houses out there, and what supply houses they do have usually don't have the right materials, so you have to make do with things. Another note too is that I really wanted to go away from the resilient mount. Okay, that's the cradle mount that had the bushings, but I had to go back in with that same motor or the same style because we could not find a rigid base even in my area that has, great supplies. I mean, it was just hard to find it in a 208 single phase 3/4 horsepower with a rigid base. The supply house was actually out of them even in my area. So I went back with the resilient mount or the cradle mount. Not my favorite, but it'll be okay. It's just the reason why I don't like the cradle mount or the resilient mounts is, like I showed in the video, eventually over time, the torque of the starting of the motor ever so slightly moves the motor and it just puts extra strain on things, and I'm just not a fan of that. I've had resilient mount motors on bigger exhaust fans literally jump out of the cradles because of the torque to start up, especially when the pulleys start to fail. What you'll see when the belts get stuck in the pulley, instead of breaking the belt, it'll rip the motor out of the cradle mount, and then it just creates a headache for you too on a Friday night. So but, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. That little electrical thing that I had to make. I mean, it's one of those things. It's functional. Maybe it's not like 100% correct, but it's not a big deal. Everything's good. We're not always perfect. We got to do the best with what we have, and you got to use ingenuity sometimes. As far as getting that fitting, I had to think like, hey, this is a quote. I need to get this exhaust fan running. Do I want to go waste 45 minutes trying to find a fitting at the hardware store, go try find an electrical supply house? Not really. I could just make something work, All right. Really, really appreciate you guys making it to the end of this video. Keep in mind, I go live on the HVAC Overtime channel on Friday evenings with my friends. Check that out. Okay, the link to the Overtime channel is in the show notes of this video. I also go live on my own channel, this one, on Monday evenings about 5 p.m. Pacific time, work permitting. So long as I can get off work, I go live and I answer questions about these, interact with the chat. So definitely come check that out. If you guys are interested in supporting the channel, do me a favor, check out my website, hvacrvideos.com. I got merch available on there. We got hats, beanies, sweaters, hoodies. And I don't know if people realize too, I've said this a few times, I actually have women's cut shirts too. So like women's V-neck shirts that fit, women differently. We have small through extra large on the website too. So if you're interested, nobody's even purchased any of those yet. I think I've given more away. I think I've given 2 away and nobody's even purchased them. So check it out. That's hvacrvideos.com. Other ways to support the channel is doing what you guys are doing right now. Simply watching to the end of the video, leaving me some feedback, give me a thumbs up, a thumbs down. That really helps the channel. You can become a Patreon patron. Okay. Basically, a Patreon patron is a way to commit to giving the channel a certain amount of money, whatever you choose. I think there's tiers that I have set up, like $1.99 a month, $5.99 a month, $19.99 a month, and then I think like $50 a month or something like that. You're feel free to choose. I think you can even do a custom tier, whatever you want. And then we also have YouTube channel memberships. So similar to Patreon, it's just a way you become a channel member, and then it's just you commit to giving so much money a month or something like that. But again, you don't have to do any of that stuff. It's greatly appreciated for those that have. Anyways, now that I'm rambling, the last thing I want to say, I'm not going to give any big hints, but pay attention to my video that comes out on Christmas Eve. If everything works correctly, there should be a special video coming out. That'll be pretty cool. Okay, so check it out. I can't really give any more away, but it's going to be a pretty cool one if everything works out. If I can do all my editing and get it all taken care of, there should be a pretty cool video coming out that after the video is released, some people are going to be very happy about what comes from that video. Okay, that's about all the hints that I can give. There's a lot of stuff still working on that video. It's this really cool thing that I decided to do. I'm super excited about it. So if everything goes well, there'll be a video Christmas Eve, the Thursday. Okay, and some people are going to be very happy. Okay, so just keep an eye out for that video. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so very much from the bottom of my heart. We are on the road to 100,000 subscribers, guys. We are so close. I think we're like 3,000 away or something like that. It's really cool, very humbling. Okay, so we'll catch you guys on the next one.